People say betrayal feels like a stab in the back, but what if it's just a hairline crack spreading quietly through everything? The apartment felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the late winter wind pressing against the old Boston windows, or maybe it was the memory that wouldn't leave Rachel alone. She turned the scallop over in the pan, watching it sear to a golden crust. The sizzle was familiar grounding, but her hands moved with less certainty than usual. Everything she did tonight felt off by half a beat. She glanced over at the old knife block. The handle of her chef's knife was chipped, a fine fracture visible like a scar. It hadn't been there yesterday. Or maybe it had, and she just hadn't let herself see it. The smell of butter and thyme swirled through the air, and she leaned closer, inhaling. It was the dish Grandma Evelyn used to make for her, standing in the tiny kitchen of their seaside house in Marblehead. Rachel could still see her apron tied tight. Silver hair swept up, murmuring, "You don't cook for applause. You cook because something in you won't shut up until you do." That was before everything got quieter. Before Evelyn stopped speaking her truth. Before Rachel did too. She plated the scallops, delicately sprinkling over a few microgreens, then stepped back to observe. Her presentation was impeccable, but all she could hear was her mother's voice echoing in her head from years ago, sweet and sharp like undercooked rhubarb. "Food is fine, honey, but don't you want something bigger? Something stable?" That day was supposed to be Rachel's. She had stood in her chef's whites, holding her diploma from the Culinary Institute of America, her fingers still raw from the final practicum. Her parents had come late, her dad barely hiding his confusion at the school's size, her mom smiling too much. The gift they handed her was a set of knives, high-end, engraved with her initials. And her mother had said, almost like an afterthought, "Make this your legacy." She had smiled, bit her tongue, said thank you. As if legacy was something you were handed, not something you carved out of blood and repetition. A buzz from her phone interrupted the memory. Rachel wiped her hands on a towel and picked it up. "Chloe, can you bring dessert to Sunday dinner? Also dress nice. Dad wants a family photo." Rachel stared at the screen, her thumb hovering above the keyboard. She didn't reply. Instead, she walked back to the cutting board, lifted the cracked knife. The weight was familiar, but something had shifted. She adjusted her grip. As she sliced into the lemon for the finishing touch, the blade slipped sideways. Too late to stop it. The edge nicked her index finger. Sharp, stinging pain flared instantly. She winced, dropped the knife. Blood welled up fast. It wasn't deep, but it was messy. She moved to the sink, running her hand under cold water. Red swirled down the drain like watercolor. Rachel grabbed a dish towel, pressed it to the cut. Behind her, the knife lay on the counter. The crack in its handle had widened just a little. This was nothing, she told herself. Just a stupid accident. Still, the sting lingered. She thought of the family dinner, the long oak table, her mother's passive-aggressive praise. Chloe sitting tall, talking about business opportunities and brand strategy, while their dad nodded like it was gospel. And Rachel the chef, the odd one, the one who didn't wear heels or smile on command. They liked her cooking. They didn't like her voice. She opened the fridge, half hoping for something sweet and mindless to eat. A childhood habit: eat sugar, quiet the thoughts. But nothing in there looked good. She slammed the door shut. This time, I'm not showing up to be their flavor of the month. She walked back to the counter slowly, picked up the knife again, ran her thumb along the smooth side of the blade, not the edge. The handle felt wrong in her palm now. She looked at the cracked knife, then muttered, "Time to stop pretending it still cuts clean." Every family photo is staged forgiveness. The Morgan family house hadn't changed. White pillared front porch, neatly swept hedges trimmed to symmetrical perfection, as if emotional messes couldn't find their way past good landscaping. I stood outside longer than I should have, gripping the tart tin with both hands like it might explode. Inside, the scent of rosemary chicken and polished wood met me at the door. My mother's voice floated from the kitchen. "Rachel's here," she called out, bright and airy, like this wasn't just another chapter in a long, exhausting play. I handed her the tart. Lemon thyme custard, fresh cream candied zest. She looked at it for a beat too long, then said, "Well, isn't this fancy? I hope it's not too refined for the boys. They're more meat and potatoes." It was always a dance praise that curdled halfway down. I smiled politely and moved past her into the dining room. Greg was already seated at the head of the table wearing his Sunday smirk and button-down confidence. Chloe sat beside him, scrolling through something on her phone and laughing too loudly. Aunt Linda stood near the window nursing a glass of wine. She gave me a quick nod. Grandma Evelyn was tucked quietly in her usual spot, hands folded like origami. "Rachel," Greg said, as if I were a new hire. "Heard you've been doing interesting things with seafood." "I've been teaching some private classes," I said, setting the tart down. "Trying to simplify classic technique." "Ah," he replied, swirling his wine. "But have you thought bigger? Like, entrepreneurial?" Bigger? Chloe jumped in like she'd been waiting. "Actually, Dad and I were just talking about something." "Right, Dad?" He raised an eyebrow. "We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But yes, there's been some real momentum lately. Investors, location scouting." Sandra walked in, placing a salad bowl in the center of the table like a prop. "Let's all sit. We can talk shop over dinner." The food was passable. Chicken, green beans, the kind of mashed potatoes that make you think of PTA meetings and suburban conformity. I reached for a roll, letting the conversation drift around me like smoke. Chloe was talking about brand identity and market gaps. Greg nodded often, as if every buzzword made him wiser. Then Sandra chimed in, dabbing at her lips. "Rachel's name still carries weight, especially among the local food crowd. She could lend that, if she wants." I paused, knife halfway through a roasted carrot. "Lend it," Chloe giggled, pushing back her curls like a politician on camera. "Okay, okay. Big reveal time. We're opening a restaurant. And guess what? It'll be under your name." No one laughed, not even Aunt Linda. I stared at her, willing her to crack the joke open to say she was kidding. But Chloe just kept smiling like a child waiting for applause. Greg leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low. "It makes perfect sense, Rachel. Your name has equity. We're just activating it. And we'll give you credit, of course." "Credit?" I repeated. "Symbolic," co-founder Chloe added. "You be part of it technically." The room shrank. I couldn't hear the clink of glasses anymore, only the faint hum of betrayal humming beneath the tablecloth. Sandra reached over and patted my hand. "Think of it as a compliment, sweetheart." I pulled my hand away. Aunt Linda looked up from her wine glass, eyes sharp. Grandma Evelyn said nothing, but she was watching me like she had been the whole time. I picked up my fork. My hand felt suddenly alien, slow, underwater. I stared at the piece of chicken on my plate like it had turned into something else. Maybe it had. This was it. The thing that couldn't be unseen. My fork hovered midair. Grandma Evelyn whispered, "Careful, sweetheart. They like pretty cages." Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together. What does it mean when your name becomes someone else's property? The apartment was still dim when I opened my eyes. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand. I ignored it the first time, then the second. But the third was impossible to tune out, slicing into the quiet like a summons. "Chloe, it's a brand, Rach. You'll get exposure? No real work. Just chill. Okay, exposure." The word made my skin crawl, like a camera flash you didn't agree to. Bright, invasive final. I rolled out of bed, pulled on yesterday's hoodie, and padded barefoot into the kitchen. The cracked knife was still on the counter. I slid it into the drawer without looking. Coffee. I needed caffeine, oxygen, and something to anchor my hands before I did what I'd been avoiding. I opened my laptop and typed my name into the Massachusetts Business Registry. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. The loading bar moved slowly like it was daring me to regret this. Then it appeared. Rachel Morgan Culinary Group LLC registered March 1, 2023, managing member Greg Morgan. The coffee mug nearly slipped from my hand. My name was already on paper, inked into something real, something moving. Not a brainstorm or a late-night what if, but a legal entity. With my signature nowhere near it. I stared at the screen until the words bled together. Then I grabbed my bag and left, needing air motion, anything that wasn't silence or lemon-scented betrayal. The Boston morning was brisk, the kind that made your lungs tighten with each breath. I walked quickly, then faster, like I could outrun the registered lie that now carried my name. I ended up at the cafe near the Culinary Institute. It still smelled like ambition and burnt espresso. Students hovered in clusters, white coats stained with sauce and adrenaline. I stood at the back, letting the hum wrap around me like a language I hadn't spoken in a while. Chef West spotted me before I could turn away. His apron was cleaner than I remembered, but his eyes were just as sharp. "Well, if it isn't my most stubborn student," he said, coming over. "Still cooking with that chip on your shoulder? I think someone just tried to use my whole shoulder," I said. He raised an eyebrow. I told him enough to draw the shape of it. The LLC, the photo, the vague family dinner that had spiraled into something concrete. "They're launching a restaurant," I said. "Under my name. I'm not involved." "Not really, but legally." "It's not the kitchen that makes the chef," he said, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. "It's what she allows to be served in her name." I sat with that. It wasn't advice, not exactly. It was a warning dressed in wisdom. On the walk home, I kept checking my phone. No new texts, just the old ones lined up like a confession. I opened the pitch deck Chloe had emailed just for fun. I hadn't read it before. Now I clicked. There I was. Slide 2. A photo from my graduation, white coat, knife in hand, the proud daughter of a proud lie. Slide 5. A bio lifted word for word from my professional site. Chef Rachel Morgan, known for her clean technique and coastal flavor profiles. Slide 9. Projected revenue. Menu samples. A quote attributed to me, one I never said. There was no just chill anymore. There was strategy. There was theft. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, not from tears, but from something colder, focus. I reached for my phone. "Aunt Linda," I said when she answered. My voice was steady, lower than usual. "Do you still know that lawyer you once mentioned? They raised me to stay polite. They forgot. Polite doesn't mean powerless." The server poured my water with a smile too tight to be genuine. I thanked him anyway, then straightened the napkin on my lap, like it was the only thing I could control. Across the table, Chloe was already mid-story, something about a brunch influencer and a collab opportunity. Greg checked his watch. Sandra arranged her silverware with precision. No one asked how I'd been. That was the thing about my family, unless you arrived on fire, they assumed you were fine. I waited until the waiter walked away before I spoke. "Did you file a business under my name?" Greg blinked once, then offered that familiar half-smile he wore during tax season and difficult conversations. "Of course we did. We're a team, Rachel. It's all in the family." Chloe leaned in, eyes wide, like this was just a surprise party, and I was reacting badly to balloons. "It's going to be beautiful. And with your name, we can actually get a seat at the table, real investors, real press. You've already done the hard part." "The hard part," I repeated. She reached across, touching my arm briefly. "Please don't be difficult about this. This means everything to me." And there it was, the gilt card laminated and played with trembling sincerity. I pulled my arm away. Sandra exhaled sharply through her nose. "You always make things so complicated." A few tables over, someone laughed too loud. I stared at my water glass. The ice had already started to melt. "Let me make sure I understand," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You filed an LLC in my name. You used my resume, my image, my history, and you never asked me." Greg waved his hand like he was clearing dust from a table. "It's just paperwork. We knew you'd come around once you saw the potential." Chloe nodded. "And it's not like we're profiting yet. You'll be the face, but we'll handle the logistics. You can keep teaching your classes or whatever." "Whatever," I repeated. Sandra sipped her iced tea. "You know, a good daughter makes things easier, not harder." I felt the shift then, not a crack, not a break, but a final hinge unlocking inside me. There was no misunderstanding here. They didn't think they were stealing. They thought they were entitled. "You stole something," I said, my voice sharper than I'd planned. "And no, I'm not signing anything." All three of them blinked at once like synchronized swimmers caught mid-routine. Greg leaned back in his chair. "That's dramatic, Rachel." "I'm being direct," I said. "Something you've never been great at handling." Chloe's lip trembled. "Why are you doing this?" I stood up. My chair made a noise that turned heads. "I didn't care. Because I've spent years being quiet so you could all stay comfortable. And I'm done." I tossed a 20 on the table, enough to cover my untouched salad. Their eyes followed me, but no one called out. The wind hit me the moment I stepped outside, brisk and sobering. I walked half a block before checking my phone. One new message. "Ethan W. Available for coffee this Friday. Some knives cut onions. Others cut illusions." The cafe was tucked into a brick corner near Harvard Square, the kind of place where the light always looked like early afternoon, and everything smelled like almond flour and ambition. I arrived first, ordered tea I wouldn't drink, and sat by the window with my cracked phone screen turned down. The table was too clean. My hands kept moving, fidgeting with the spoon, straightening the sugar packets, flattening the creases on a napkin. Then I saw him. Ethan Walsh hadn't changed. Not really. The same careful walk, like he was always trying not to take up too much space. Brown coat, messenger bag, slightly unkempt hair that somehow still looked deliberate. He spotted me and hesitated, then smiled small and uneven, like he'd once broken it. He slid into the seat across from me. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied. "I wasn't sure if you'd actually call," he admitted, pulling out a reusable water bottle like it was armor. "It's been, what, 7 years?" "8, I said before I could stop myself. "And a half." He nodded. "Right. We didn't mention why we'd stopped talking, or what we'd almost been. That would have taken too long. And time wasn't why I was here." I pulled the folder from my bag, the one Aunt Linda helped me compile. Printout screenshots, the PDF pitch deck. Ethan flipped through it, silently nodding once in a while, mouth tight. "They didn't just register the business," I said. "They used my resume, my image, my words, without asking." He tapped one of the pages. "This document. It lists you as an active founding partner. Signed by you." I didn't sign anything. "I know. That's the problem." He closed the folder and sat back. The cafe around us had filled with quiet students and louder cappuccino machines, but our table felt sealed off, like the conversation was too sharp for ambient sound. "You've got a case," he said, "and you've got a name to protect. Let's make it clear it's not theirs." My chest expanded and tightened at once, like I'd been holding my breath since the moment Chloe said, "Under your name," and now I wasn't sure if I was inhaling or screaming. We walked to his office a few blocks away. It wasn't sleek or intimidating, just 2 rooms, some books, and a plaque that didn't quite sit straight on the wall. It looked like the kind of place where people fixed things the hard way. He handed me a retainer agreement. I read every line twice, then once more. The pen felt heavy in my hand. "This is real," I said. "So is what they did," Ethan replied. But this time, you get to choose what happens next. I signed. He slipped the paper into a file and stood. First move, a cease and desist. I looked at him. He grinned slightly. Let's serve it with something they'll remember. The first shot I ever fired wasn't loud. It came in a white envelope. Ethan held the draft like it was a scalpel, not paper. His fingers didn't tremble, but mine itched just looking at it. The law office smelled faintly of ink and old toner, something surgical and final in the air. Let's walk through it one more time, he said, placing the letter gently on the desk between us. I nodded. The words stared back at me like accusations, though they weren't aimed at me. Cease and desist, intellectual property violation, brand, misrepresentation, and unauthorized use of name and likeness. They weren't just legal terms. They were my reputation. My years in kitchens that didn't know my name until the food hit the table. My grandmother's recipes scrawled in pencil living inside me longer than some memories. My name didn't just brand a project, they'd turned it into currency. I laid out the trademark and identity rights, Ethan said calmly. And we've cited 2 previous cases, similar misuse, similar family dynamics. It's clean. It's strong. But it only works if you sign it. I looked at the spot marked with a small X. I thought of the cracked knife. The one I kept in my drawer, not because it was still useful, but because it reminded me of how even small fractures could cut deep if you weren't careful. That blade was never loud, but it had sharp edges, just like this moment. I picked up the pen, clicked it, held it just above the line. You okay? Ethan asked, quieter now. I don't know, I said, but I'm sure. I signed. There it was. No lightning, no fanfare. Just ink on paper. But my stomach twisted like I'd thrown a punch and didn't know who'd catch it. Ethan nodded. Let's get the hard copies printed. You still want to go the old school route? No emails, I said. I want them to feel it hit the table. He cracked a faint smile. Old school it is? We spent the next hour folding ceiling labeling. It felt almost mundane, like we were sending wedding invites or tax forms. But each envelope was weighted with history, with silence being finally undone. We drove to the FedEx Center just before dusk. The sky had turned that in-between gray, not yet night, but long past light. Ethan parked and I sat for a moment, the envelope warm in my lap, despite the chill in the air. You sure you don't want me to drop it? He asked. I have to do it, I said. I stepped inside. The clerk didn't blink when I asked for overnight delivery. Just printed the labels, handed me the final tape, and gestured toward the drop box. I held the envelope one last time. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like a door locking behind me. I slid it into the outgoing slot. My hand shook, but my eyes didn't. By the time we got back to the car, my phone buzzed. Chloe, WTF is this? We're family. You don't sue family. They went silent. Which was worse than shouting. No texts, no calls. Just the flat stillness of unread messages and the quiet ticking of dread. After Chloe's furious outburst, everything had dropped off a cliff. No follow-up, no drama, just nothing. And somehow that hurt worse. Shouting meant people still cared enough to burn oxygen. This vacuum was its own kind of violence. I wiped my hands on the apron and stepped into the test kitchen at Terra Flame. The space was clean and bright, but hollow, like it was waiting for something alive to fill it. Chef West had offered me the evening to reclaim my rhythm, as he called it. A few hours alone. No menu, no pressure. Just me, stainless steel, and the ghosts in my own bones. Marcus was already there, leaning against the prep counter with his arms crossed and a skeptical tilt to his mouth. You're the legacy, he said, not unkindly. I shrugged, more like the ghost of one. He raised an eyebrow but didn't push. I appreciated that. I started with something simple: onions, butter, a skillet too clean for comfort. I peeled and chopped with muscle memory, letting the scent settle into the room like an offering. My hands remembered what my heart forgot, but everything felt muted, like I was underwater, like the blade was cutting through fog. Marcus watched, not intrusively, just curiously. After a while, he said, "You cook like someone who's hiding." I froze. He didn't say it like an insult, just fact. I stared down at the butter melting unevenly in the pan. I don't know what's mine anymore. Marcus didn't reply, but he didn't leave either. I kept going. I pulled out scallops, the good kind, dry, pink-edged, still smelling faintly of the sea. I trimmed them, salted them gently, and set them aside while I got the sweet corn hash going. Grandma Evelyn had taught me this dish in her tiny kitchen with curtains that never matched. It wasn't a recipe, it was a ritual. The smell started to feel right. Not good, not happy, but right. Then my phone rang. Ethan. I stepped into the hallway to answer. They replied, he said. Through their legal team. Said they're disappointed. No official counter yet, but the subtext is obvious they're regrouping. Of course they are, I said, pressing my thumb against the cold tile wall. They're underestimating you, Ethan added. Keep it that way. When I returned, Marcus had plated the hash while I was gone. Not bad. A little heavy on the butter, but respectable. You okay? He asked. I'm adjusting. He nodded toward the scallops. You want to finish that? I seared them just like Evelyn had taught me. Hot pan, no oil, dry surface, 90 seconds on each side. Don't crowd them or they'll steam. When I flipped the first one, the golden crust made a soft hiss like a secret. That was when it hit me, not nostalgia, not joy, just clarity. This was mine. Not the LLC, not the pitch deck, not the false family project. This plate, this moment belonged to me. I spooned the scallops gently onto the hash, garnished it with shaved scallion and a whisper of lemon zest, then stepped back. Marcus stared at it. Then he looked at me. You're not cooking for them anymore, he said quietly. You're cooking for revenge. It was supposed to be Sunday dinner. It felt like a war room. The table was already set when I arrived, gleaming silverware, over-polished glasses, a roast that tried too hard. There was only one empty chair. Mine. Positioned like a trap. Everyone else was already seated. Greg at the head, flanked by Sandra with her posture knife straight. Chloe, eyes down, fork circling her plate. Grandma Evelyn sat in near stillness, hands folded, watching me the way a hawk watches weather. I placed my bag beside the chair but didn't sit. Traffic. Greg asked lightly, as if the silence wasn't curdling in the room. Timing, I replied. Always a question of timing. Chloe poured herself a glass of wine, her hands visibly shaking. Sandra passed a dish I didn't reach for. We chewed in orchestrated silence. The food had no taste. Conversation skimmed the surface, whether renovations, some politician's scandal, the neighborhood watch. It was like dancing on a frozen lake with cracks spidering underneath. Then Greg set down his fork with deliberate care. Let's talk this through, he said like a CEO at the end of a quarterly report. We don't need lawyers. We need love. I looked him dead in the eye. Love doesn't forge my name. Sandra sucked in a breath as though I'd just shouted obscenity at a funeral. I'm sorry, Chloe blurted, pushing her plate aside. But you always had everything. The talent, the praise, the attention. This restaurant was finally something for me. You could have built something real, I said, voice steady. Instead, you stole the one thing I spent my life earning. It's still your name, Greg countered. We didn't take it, we expanded it. You should be thanking us. I laughed. Low, cold. You expanded it into a logo, into a brochure, into a fantasy with no consent and no soul. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be, Sandra added. Families work things out privately, not with lawsuits. You had every chance to work this out, I said. Before the business registry, before the pitch deck, before the forged contracts. Chloe's eyes shimmered. You think this was easy for me? I didn't want to compete with you. I just wanted. What a shortcut. Chloe flinched. The silence that followed wasn't passive anymore. It bristled. Then Evelyn stood. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't raise her voice. She simply rose, straightened her shawl, and spoke like she'd been waiting for this moment since the first lie was told. Rachel built her name with burn marks and late shifts, she said, with hands blistered from prep work and a spine held straight through every insult she swallowed. You built a fantasy. Chloe's face crumpled. Greg looked away. Sandra's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. I pushed back my chair. Are we done? I asked. We're done, Sandra said, each word sharp. If you walk out tonight, you're no longer our daughter. I paused in the doorway, not because I doubted, but because I wanted the last word to be a scalpel. Then stop using my name to sell your menu. They stole the recipe, but they forgot who wrote it. Grandma Evelyn's key was small and tarnished, like it had lived a quiet, resentful life in the bottom of a drawer. She handed it to me in the Terraflame kitchen, her hand trembling not from age but from restraint. Your mother stashed them years ago, she said. I rented the unit in my name so she wouldn't throw them out. I thought, someday you might need them. She didn't say proof, but I heard it anyway. Marcus stood by the walk-in fridge, silently wiping down steel trays, pretending not to listen, but fully alert. Ethan, already on the phone with the notary, gave me a nod. I didn't need words. I was moving. The storage unit smelled like cardboard and mildew and forgotten victories. It was on the second floor of a dimly lit warehouse near Cambridge, a place where memories and evidence shared equal shelf space. I slid the key in, twisted, and the lock popped with a metallic sigh. Inside, a banker's box labeled Rachel, school stuff. Underneath a stack of faded ribbons and photocopied report cards was the real treasure, a brown accordion folder with plastic sleeves, each labeled in my teenage handwriting: tomato basil tart, cinnamon roast, chicken seared, scallop hash. I flipped through the pages, a cold knot forming in my gut. The handwriting matched, the measurements were mine, even the photo of the tart I'd shot on Dad's clunky old Nikon. But none of this had my name on it anymore. At the bottom of the box, a spiral-bound manuscript draft. Cover page: Flavors of the Morgans. Subtitle: A Culinary Journey of Love and Legacy. Author Chloe Morgan. Inside, my words, my photos, my techniques. Even my intro cooking isn't about impressing people. It's about remembering where you came from. Ethan met me back at his office. His jaw clenched as he thumbed through the draft. They really thought you'd never look, he said, each word sharp. He dropped the folder on his desk and reached for another one. And this, he added, flipping it open, is how they planned to fund it. Bank documents. Multiple. Pages of application form signatures. A $150,000 line of credit co-signed using my name. Fake email. A scanned signature from an old lease I'd signed in culinary school. I sat down slowly. Ethan didn't. This is no longer just civil, he said, slamming the folder shut. This borders on criminal misrepresentation. I looked at the pages again. My recipes stripped of soul. My name leveraged into debt. My family's legacy of smiles unraveling on a lawyer's desk. I stood, straightened my coat, and smiled, not the way I used to, not the way they trained me to, but the way someone does when they know what's coming out of the oven belongs to them. Let's raise the heat. They said I was ungrateful. I say they lacked imagination. The press lights were unforgiving. Harsh white and too close, but they didn't shake me. I'd burned my fingers on hotter things than attention. I stood at the pass in Terraflame's test kitchen, one hand steadying the plate, the other trailing a sauce swirl over a seared scallop dish that shimmered like armor. Scallop redemption. Marcus had laughed when I named it, but he got it. I wasn't here for applause. I was here to reclaim oxygen, The room was packed with food writers, influencers, a local PBS host with too many teeth, and Chef West standing behind the line like a silent general. Grandma Evelyn sat near the back hands, folded her gaze, proud but quiet. She didn't clap when the cameras turned. She watched me the way people watch sunrise, like they knew it would happen eventually, even if others doubted. This dish, I said, facing the room, was taught to me by someone who believed in butter more than words. She cooked not to be seen, but so no one felt forgotten. I let that settle. I didn't smile. I've spent years in kitchens where credit was currency. I gave more than I got. Until one day I realized if they're using my name, maybe it's time I did too. There was a pause. Scallop Redemption is not just a meal, it's a message for every person who chopped onions in the back while someone else took the bow. This is for you. Flashbulbs popped. Chef West leaned into the mic. Meet our new head chef for the summer concept at Terra Flame, Rachel Morgan. The applause wasn't thunderous, but it was real. In the corner of my eye, I saw Marcus grinning, nodding like he knew what it had cost to plate that kind of truth. In the back, Grandma Evelyn lifted a hand, not waving, just anchoring me to the moment. After the event, I slipped into the prep kitchen to breathe. My phone buzzed. "Chloe, congrats." "I'm out." That was all. No punctuation, no venom. Just the door closing softly instead of slamming. I sat down on an overturned crate and stared at the screen. There was no victory dance in me. Just a deep breath and the familiar scent of garlic and steel. Another buzz. This time from Ethan, a forwarded message from my parents' legal team. "We are prepared to offer a settlement including ceasing use of the Rachel Morgan Culinary Group name in exchange for a signed NDA and mutual release of future claims." Translation: silence. In exchange for peace. I stared at it for a long time, letting the heat rise, not anger exactly. Something older. Something cleaner. I looked out through the kitchen's pass window. Beyond the gleam of the stove and the freshly wiped counters was the long, winding hallway toward the future I'd built from scraps and salt. And I whispered to myself, quiet, certain, I'm not settling. I'm serving. For years, I knocked on doors asking to be let in. Now I build them. And I decide who walks through. The brass handle of the kitchen door had her name etched in it. Not a sticker. Not a laminated printout for opening night. It was engraved into the metal Rachel Morgan Executive Chef. Her hand hovered over it for a second too long, but she didn't let herself tremble. Not tonight. Outside, the dining area shimmered under soft lighting filled with the chatter of food writers, donors, local culinary celebrities, and people who suddenly remembered they'd once doubted her. Terra Flame's seasonal kitchen was now hers for the next 4 months. Her concept, her menu, her rules. She adjusted the cuffs of her jacket, crisp white, starched just enough, and pushed the doors open. Ethan stood near the bar, glass in hand. When their eyes met, he tilted it in silent cheers. Marcus passed behind her carrying 2 plates, whispered "Kitchen's flying boss," and disappeared back behind the line. It was humming back there, tight, clean, disciplined. Chef West gave a subtle nod from the shadows. His presence felt more than seen. He wouldn't take credit, and he didn't need it. He'd already passed the torch. Rachel stepped toward the mic. The murmur of the room softened. Cameras rose. "When I was a kid," she began, "my mother told me that no one wants a chef who speaks too much. Just make the food and smile." Pause. I did that. For years. I made the food. I smiled. And people took the credit. A ripple moved through the crowd. "But tonight I serve you something different. Not just scallops or sorbets. I'm serving the truth that behind every dish there is labor. Behind every name there is a person. And behind this kitchen there is a story. Mine." Polite clapping turned sincere. Someone in the back gave a short whoop. Rachel smiled barely and let it pass. She continued, This concept, this menu, this team, it isn't just a project, it's proof that when someone takes your voice, you don't whisper, you get louder. She turned toward the back table where Grandma Evelyn sat wearing pearl earrings and the quiet pride of someone who'd been overlooked too long. I dedicate this to the first true chef in my family, Evelyn Morgan, who taught me that food remembers what people forget. The room rose. Some clapped, others blinked fast and looked down. But Rachel wasn't watching them anymore. She was watching the shadows backstage. Because there, half in the dark, stood Chloe. She looked different, less polished, a little thinner. Her arms crossed too tightly. Anger flickered on her face, but something else, too. Something uncertain. Rachel walked toward her, calm, unhurried. "You came," she said. "I had to see it for myself," Chloe muttered. "You really did it. You could build something too," Rachel said softly. "Just not with pieces of me." Chloe looked away. "I didn't think it would go this far. It always goes this far. When you forget where the recipe came from." There was nothing else to say. Rachel stepped back into the light. The crowd buzzed. The kitchen roared, the scent of rosemary and pan-seared cod filled the air. A notification flashed on her phone, held discreetly under her menu clipboard. Breaking chef's family, accused of fraudulent branding and identity misuse. A leak. The bank documents. Her father's signature. Her stolen resume. It was all in the headline. She didn't flinch. She looked down at her name on the menu again, no longer borrowed. No longer background. Every secret ingredient has a cost. Theirs was finally due. The office smelled like lemon polish and old tension. Ethan's desk was cluttered but not chaotic. Legal pads, printed emails, a laptop buzzing with notifications. The morning sun slanted through the blinds in long, accusatory stripes. It felt like the perfect day to expose something. I sat with my hands wrapped around a mug of tea I hadn't touched. Ethan tapped his keyboard once, then again. He didn't look at me. "They're everywhere," he muttered. "The emails. The screenshots. Someone sent the entire investor thread to a food journalist, and it's already spreading." He turned the screen toward me. Greg Morgan, March 2023. "Rachel's never been savvy with numbers. We'll handle the books. She just wants to cook and be adored like most artists." Another. Greg Morgan, April 2023. "We've used her identity before. It's clean marketable. Investors eat that stuff up." The bile rose slowly in my throat like it didn't want to be rushed. I had read betrayal before, in glances, in polite dismissals. But seeing it typed out in Times New Roman in a thread titled "Pitch Packet Morgan Concept," that was new. My phone vibrated. Voice message from Chloe. I hesitated, then tapped play. "I didn't know it was this bad," her voice cracked. "I knew they were using your name. I thought it was temporary. Just marketing. But I saw the bank records. The forged signature. I didn't stop it. I wanted the restaurant so badly I let them talk me into believing it didn't hurt you. I was wrong." The silence that followed was worse than the message itself. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "We can move forward with the civil suit. The C&D rattled them, but now it's time to push. We'll cite identity theft, fraudulent misrepresentation, emotional damages." "Not just emotional," I said quietly. "They built debt in my name." He nodded. "That too. And more." A notification popped up on Ethan's monitor. A new press release. He clicked. We both stared. Statement from Sandra Morgan. "We are saddened by our daughter's actions. Families go through disagreements, but public drama helps no one. This is a misunderstanding, not a scandal. We've always supported Rachel's dreams. We hope she remembers that." I exhaled, sharp and short. "They're spinning it." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Of course they are." But I didn't clench. I didn't curse. I didn't throw the mug. I did what they never expected. I stood up. straightened my coat, smoothed the hem of my shirt like armor. No, this is a reckoning. He looked at me, not surprised, just ready. The world outside Ethan's window buzzed delivery trucks' bikes, spring air filtering through exhaust. But inside, something had finally clicked into place. I wasn't afraid of how far this would go. I was afraid it might not go far enough. My phone lit up again. New message unknown. Number. I opened it. You don't know half of what they've hidden. Former Morgan employee empires crumble slowly, then all at once. The headlines bled across every surface of my morning phone laptop radio buzz at the cafe down the street. Prominent family accused of financial misconduct in culinary brand scandal. Morgan investors withdraw support after fraud allegations. Chef Rachel Morgan distances herself from family business. They weren't my headlines, but they carried my name. For once, it wasn't stolen. Ethan was in a call when I stepped into his office, pacing near the window, face tight but calm. I caught only fragments of his conversation. Yes, we expected fallout. No, the press statement will be reviewed before release. She'll speak when she's ready. He looked at me, lowered the phone, and mouthed, "It's collapsing." Outside the courthouse, a group of reporters clustered like vultures in spring coats waiting for fresh blood. But we weren't offering them that today. By midday, 3 of the main investors in the Morgan culinary concept had publicly withdrawn support. 1 had threatened litigation of their own. Their press release read like a recipe for disaster. We were misled regarding brand ownership and name usage. We were not aware of the forged documents or internal family conflict. Sandra tried damage control with an exclusive interview, but the footage only proved one thing: she looked more composed than truthful. That afternoon, someone knocked on my door. I expected a courier, maybe even a neighbor. But when I opened it, Chloe stood there. She held a cardboard box, not heavy but worn. Her hair was tied back too tightly, as if she was holding herself together with pins and rubber bands. "They kept things from me too," she said, before I could even breathe. Bank statements, letters from lawyers. I thought I was part of it, but maybe we were both props. I stepped aside. She entered without asking. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But for the first time in months, maybe years, there was no armor between us. She placed the box on my kitchen table. Inside, printed documents, family notes, a flash drive, a worn-out copy of my old contest submission from high school, with Chloe's handwriting in the margins. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said. "I just don't want to be like them." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Grandma Evelyn. "Come by," she said simply. "I have something for you." I left Chloe with the tea kettle and walked across town. Evelyn's old house had barely changed in decades. Same creaky steps, same uneven fence gate that clicked like a secret being kept. She greeted me at the door, no smile, no ceremony, just warmth. In the kitchen, she handed me a cloth-bound book. The cover was blank. "It's our family recipe journal," she said. "Sandra never touched it. Greg didn't care. I saved it for the one who'd use it right." I opened it. The first half was filled ink-stained pages of old-world food, Southern recipes, coded notations only a woman like Evelyn could interpret. The second half, empty. "All those blank pages," she said, "are for you." I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat down at the counter and pulled a pen from the drawer. Page 1 blank, no longer. Scallop redemption. V2 pan-seared scallops, sweet corn hash but with a twist of lemon zest and chili oil. Not for nostalgia. For now. I looked up. Evelyn nodded once. "Now it's yours." As the sun lowered through the kitchen window, casting gold over flour-dusted counters, my phone buzzed again. "Ethan," I answered. "They're offering a full settlement," he said. "No NDA this time. Public apology included. Justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the sound of your own door closing." Their house felt smaller. Not in square footage, but in presence. The white pillared facade looked less stately now, more like a stage set after the final scene. I had driven here without music, without rehearsing any lines, just silence and the hum of my own breath. Sandra opened the door. Her makeup was lighter than usual. She didn't smile. "Rachel," she said almost as a formality. I stepped inside. The air was chilled by something more than central air. Greg sat on the edge of the living room couch, hands steepled like he was leading a shareholders' meeting. The fireplace, once the backdrop of so many posed Christmas photos, was dark. I placed the document on the coffee table, a clean, sharp stack of signatures. "I accept the public apology," I said, "but I don't forgive you." Greg cleared his throat. "This didn't need to go so far." "Didn't it?" I asked. "You built something with my name? You lied. You took. We're your family," Sandra said. Her voice frayed around the edges. "We didn't raise you to fight us." I met her gaze. "No. You raised me to be silent. I unlearned it." Greg shifted. "We wanted to build something lasting. For all of us." "You built it on top of me," I said calmly. "You didn't lift me up. You stood on me." For a moment, no one moved. The air settled into stillness, the kind that follows something breaking. Then I turned, walked toward the door. Not fast, not dramatic. Just done. And the only sound I heard was the door closing behind me. I found Grandma Evelyn on a park bench, the kind she used to sit on when she needed to see things without being seen. The April wind carried traces of jasmine and city dust. Her thermos steamed beside her. She didn't ask how it went. She didn't need to. Instead, she said, "You know, your silence used to scare me." I blinked, surprised. "You were so quiet, so contained, like a pot that never boiled. I worried you'd disappear into their expectations." I sat down beside her. She turned to face me, eyes clear as the early evening light. "But now your silence scares them. And it should." I didn't respond. Just leaned my head against her shoulder like I had when I was 10 and afraid of thunderstorms. We sat like that for a while, in silence, but this time not the kind that stifles, the kind that says I am done explaining myself. When I got home, the box from Chloe was still on my table, but beside it was a new envelope. No return address. Cream paper hand-addressed. Inside, "Heard your food speaks. Care to open your own place." Anonymous donor. No signature, no logo, just belief. And maybe that was the only ingredient I still needed. Every single view means a meal for someone in need. Just by watching this video, you're giving warmth, hope, and a full plate to those less fortunate. So watch now, share now, subscribe to the channel, and let's spread love together. Pose. The best kitchens don't just cook food, they cook freedom. The doors were glass-framed in brushed steel. Not ostentatious, not cold, just clean. Just clear. Above them, carved into a wood beam salvaged from a demolished diner in South Boston, was the studio's name, Second Heat. Inside, everything smelled like rosemary and possibility. The front windows faced the street wide open, letting the summer air mix with the low hum of new voices. The walls were pale but warm, lined with copper pans and empty corkboards waiting to be filled with stories, recipes, student notes. And above the stovetop, centered engraved on a brass plate, were the words, "This name belongs to me." I ran my fingers across it. Not possessively, reverently. I wore a white apron with no logo, only my initials stitched into the collar. The knife I carried, clean, new, sharp, had my name etched on the handle. Not to flaunt, just to remind me that I no longer borrowed space. This was mine. Marcus was already in the back prepping ingredients with a small group of students. He waved flour streaked across his sleeve. "They're nervous," he mouthed. "So was I mouthed back. Grandma Evelyn stood near the pantry shelves organizing herbs into tiny ceramic bowls. She didn't need to be here. but I'd asked her anyway. She lit the first stove earlier with a smile that said, "I'm proud," without saying it at all. Ethan arrived just as the last student checked in. He held a bottle of champagne under one arm and a bouquet of sunflowers under the other. "Didn't want to do roses," he said. "Too cliché." "You've read me well," I replied. He handed me a small envelope. I opened it slowly. Inside a folded note card. "Thank you for not becoming like them. Chloe." No signature. Just the neat cursive that reminded me of how she used to sign yearbook messages. For the first time, I didn't feel bitterness rise, just a quiet acceptance. Growth has many witnesses, even the ones who left the room. We didn't do speeches. I hated those. Instead, I gathered everyone around the center counter and let my voice carry the way I wished someone's had for me years ago. "Welcome to Second Heat," I began. "This isn't just a cooking studio. It's a space for reclaiming stories, for unlearning silence, for turning bitterness into flavor." Smiles, nods, eyes a little wet. I picked up a scallop and placed it on the pan. It sizzled, loud, fragrant heat meeting flesh like two truths colliding. "Tonight," I said, "we learn to let things burn just enough to become something better." Laughter followed. And then the clatter of knives, the scent of basil, the steam of something more than broth rising from the pots. We cooked. Together. And when the class ended, when the last dish was plated and the last story shared, I walked back to my office tucked behind the pantry wall. I opened a drawer, pulled out a blank recipe notebook. Crisp pages, empty margins, and I wrote in ink as black as scorched sugar. Chapter 1: Not their chef anymore.